Love and survival in the Wild West. A heart-wrenching tale asterisk. The sky was still dark when the fire finally died out. Smoke curled through the morning air, rising slow like it didn't want to leave. She knelt in the ash, hands in her lap, a small Bible pressed tight against her chest. Evelyn didn't cry. Not anymore. The tears had burned up with everything else all around her. Black beams stuck out of the ground like broken bones. The mission was gone. Her brother, he was gone too. The only family she had left. He was lying in the rubble, half covered by dust and soot, his hand still clutching that old leather book he used to read from every evening. She didn't speak. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Maybe it was a prayer. Maybe she was just trying to remember how to breathe. He told her once, "Don't back down, not even in the dark." That was the last thing he said before they came. Men with no names and no mercy. They shot without asking questions, burned what they couldn't steal. He stood in front of her when they came. Faced them like he faced everything else. Calm, unafraid. He died that way. Protecting her. Now the only thing left was this book. In the road, Evelyn stood slowly, her legs shaking. She picked up a cloth sack with a few things she had managed to save. Then she turned and walked. No tears, no goodbye. Just the sound of her boots crunching in the soot. She didn't stop for hours. Dust kicked up around her feet with every step. The sun was high by the time she saw the town. A small place barely more than a few buildings and a crooked sign that once said saloon swinging in the breeze. It looked like a town that had been forgotten. And maybe it liked it that way. She walked up to the first man she saw, an old-timer with a dirty hat and cracked boots. "I need someone to take me to the army fort," she said, her voice soft but steady. He spit in the dirt, nodded toward a stagecoach across the street. "You want Sam," he muttered. "If he passed out drunk, maybe he'll listen." She turned and saw him sitting in the shade of a post, legs stretched out, a cigar in his mouth, and a flask in one hand. The coach beside him looked like it had taken more beatings than it should have, and still somehow kept going. She walked up to him without a word. He didn't even look up. "I need a guide," she said. "I can pay." Sam took a slow sip from the flask, still not looking her way. "People kill for money out here," he said. "I try not to die for dumb reasons. I'm going anyway." She answered. Finally, he looked at her. Just for a second. Dust swirled around her boots. Her dress was worn thin, her eyes hollow but steady. He let out a low sigh, stood up and brushed himself off. "Where are you headed?" "The fort?" "Fort Man." He raised an eyebrow. "That's a week's ride. Through bad land. Past swamps. Places where folks don't ask questions." "I know." He stared at her for a moment longer. Then he muttered something under his breath and slammed the coach door shut. "All right," he said. "Let's ride before I change my mind. Just so we're clear, I ain't your hero. I don't want your story." "You don't need it," she said softly. "Just take me there." The wheels creaked loud as they rolled out of town. The place faded behind them until it was nothing but dust. In front of them was open land, flat, hot and dry like the earth had given up trying to grow anything decent. Inside the coach, the air was thick. Evelyn sat still, hands folded, her face turned toward the window. Sam drove without speaking, jaw tight like a man with too much past and not enough patience. Every so often, he glanced back at her. She didn't notice or didn't care. He muttered under his breath, "I never liked people who don't talk. Makes it hard to know who you're riding with." Still, she said nothing. Just stared out at the open road. After a long while, he pulled up beside a dried-out well. "Water, stop," he said, jumping down. "Stretch your legs if you want. Just don't wander. I don't do rescues." "I'll be fine," she said, climbing down. He watched her for a second longer than he meant to, then turned away and checked. The harness. Dust kept rising in the wind. The coach groaned as they moved again. Neither of them spoke. But something unspoken had already started. Something like the beginning, the stagecoach groaned with every turn of its wheels. Like it hated being dragged back onto this lonely trail. Dust clung to the horses' legs, to the windows, to their clothes, like the land didn't want to let them go. The sun hung overhead like a curse, not hot, just heavy, like wanted you to feel small. Inside, Evelyn sat straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She didn't fidget, didn't ask questions. She stared out the window like she was counting each stone they passed. Sam didn't say much either. He drove like a man who'd done it 1,000 times, but never cared to remember any of it. He glanced over his shoulder once. Just once. Her face didn't give away anything. He grunted under his breath. "You always this quiet." She didn't answer. He shook his head and muttered to himself, "Figures." They kept on. Hours passed. The trail stretched out like it would never end. Every now and then they passed a dried bush or the carcass of something that didn't make it. Sam finally pulled the reins near a half-buried well. The wooden frame was leaning hard like it was about to fall in on itself. "We'll stop here." "Water's low, but it'll do." He climbed down slow, joints popping. Evelyn followed, her boots kicking up tiny clouds of dirt. She moved like someone who didn't expect comfort, just needed a place to stand. "Don't go far," he said, kneeling by the well. "I ain't got time to go looking for anyone." "I'm not going anywhere," she replied quietly. Sam lowered a tin cup into the well, pulled up a small scoop of water and handed it over. She didn't say thank you, but she didn't have to. The way she took it with steady hands, like it was fuel for more than just her throat was enough. "You always this calm?" he asked, not looking at her. "No," she said, "just tired." He squinted at her. "Tired gets folks killed." She took another sip. "So does caring too much." He let out a short breath that could have been a laugh or a warning. "You got grit, I'll give you that." She handed the cup back. "I didn't ask for it. It just came with losing everything." They climbed back into the coach. The wheels creaked louder this time. Like they knew the road ahead wasn't going to be kind. As they moved on, Sam chewed on a dry matchstick like it was a cigar. He kept his eyes on the trail, but every few minutes he'd throw a glance back. Something about her bothered him not. In a bad way. Just itched at him. She was quiet but not scared. Not even tired in the way most folks were. Her silence wasn't weak. It was sharp, like something hiding under the surface. "You said you're heading to the fort," he said. After a while, she nodded once. "Yes. You got someone waiting there?" "No. You think they'll help?" "I don't know." "Then why go?" She turned from the window and met his eyes. "Because it's the only place left." He looked away fast. Her voice wasn't loud, but it stuck in his chest for a moment longer than he expected. The sun dropped lower. The light turned soft and gold, but it didn't make the land look any less dead. They passed a dead tree stripped bare by wind. Then a single cross planted in the dirt, no name on it. Sam slowed the coach. "We'll camp before dark." They stopped near a few rocks that gave just enough shelter to start a fire. He worked on the harness. She gathered kindling. Neither spoke much. But when the flames finally took, casting flickering shadows across the dry land, Evelyn sat by the fire with her arms wrapped around her knees. She stared into the orange glow like it was something alive. "My brother used to sing," she said. Suddenly, voice soft. "Every morning. Even when we had nothing, even when Mama was sick." Sam didn't answer. Just kept his hands busy, checking straps that didn't need checking. "He used to say singing kept the fear away," she went on. "Even if your voice shakes." The wind shifted. The fire cracked a little louder. "He taught me to read from." "That Bible," she added. "Said God was always near, even when you couldn't hear him." Sam finally sat down. Not close, just on the other side of the fire. He rubbed the back of his neck and stared out into the night. You're not what I expected, he said. I know, she replied. Neither are you. They didn't smile, but the silence that followed didn't feel empty anymore. When they lay down for the night, it wasn't side by side. But it wasn't far. Sam sat with his back to the fire, rifle across his lap. Evelyn wrapped a worn blanket around her shoulders and stared up at the stars. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in days, she didn't feel completely alone. And Sam, he didn't say it out loud, but something inside him whispered, maybe this ride wasn't just a job anymore. Maybe she wasn't just another traveler Dot. Maybe, just maybe, she was the first person in a long time who made the silence bearable. By the next evening, the sky had changed. It wasn't just clouds anymore. It was heavy, low, like the sky itself was warning them. The wind picked up sharp and dry, tugging at the reins, kicking dust up in spirals around the trail. Sam scanned the horizon, jaw set. Storm's coming. He muttered. Evelyn looked up, but said nothing. She just pulled the old coat tighter around her shoulders. There is a place ahead, he added, pointing past the next ridge. Old ghost town. Been empty for years. Maybe longer, she nodded. Trust wasn't something they talked about, but it was there now in the way she didn't question him. In the way he didn't explain himself too much. They reached it just before nightfall. It looked like a town that had tried to hang on long after the world stopped caring. Shutters hanging by one hinge, doors swinging with the wind. A leaning water tower creaked in the breeze like it was groaning in its sleep. Sam pulled the coach under the overhang of an old barn and tied off the horses. Stay close, he said, leading her toward what used to be a general store. Inside was dry, quiet, and smelled like dust and old wood. The shelves were mostly empty, but it was shelter. Evelyn set her pack down in the corner. Sam kept pacing. Near the window, eyes sharp. Then dash footsteps. At first it was just one. Then 2, 3. Sam stepped back from the window, his voice low and tight. We've got company. Evelyn froze. 3 men, he added. Coming up the street, look armed. Don't know him, but they don't look friendly. She didn't panic, just stood there, still and ready. He turned to her, fast but calm. Listen, don't say a word. You're mute, understand? Can't speak. I'm just passing through. Got stuck in the storm. She nodded once, already wrapping the blanket from her pack around her shoulders like a worn shawl. He grabbed an old tin of dried beans from the shelf, dumped the dust out, and placed it near the fire as if they'd been there for days. The door swung open hard. Wood slammed against the wall. 2 men stepped inside. A third waited near the entrance with a rifle slung across his back. Well, well, said one of them, tall with a long scar down his cheek. Smells like strangers in here. Sam didn't move. Storm caught us on the road. Coach broke a wheel, just waiting it out. Us? The other man asked, eyes drifting toward Evelyn. Sam stepped in front of her, not aggressive, just steady. Cousin's wife, he said flatly. Fever took her voice. She don't speak. The scarred man grinned. Strange-looking wife. And you're no prize either, Sam shot back, not blinking. Silence. Heavy, the kind that could break. With one wrong word. Outside, the wind howled harder. The third man looked up at the clouds. Storm's real. We'll take the barn. Suit yourself, Sam said. Just want to get the coach moving again come morning. They turned and left. The door slammed behind them. Only once the footsteps faded did Evelyn let out a long, quiet breath. Sam looked at her. You held it together. Thought you might crack. She stared at the fire. I was thinking about my brother when the raiders came. He stayed quiet. He didn't beg. Sam sat down across from her, rubbing his hands together near the flames. He was smarter than most, he said after a long pause. They didn't speak for a while. Just the crackle of fire between them. I thought they'd recognize me, she said finally, voice low. Sam looked up. You know them? I saw them that night. Same gang that took the mission. That scar on his face, I remember it. Sam's expression shifted, just slightly. Ben will need to be gone by dawn. They're heading west, she added. Same way we are. He looked into the fire. Then we better stay ahead. The barn was quiet when they entered, horses resting in their stalls. Sam found an empty corner where the wind couldn't reach. They sat against the wall, not touching but close. The old boards creaked softly in the breeze. She looked over at him. Can I ask you something? He nodded once. Why did you lie for me? He hesitated, then leaned his head back against the wall, eyes on the rafters. Because standing next to you, it made me remember I'm not just a man on a job, not just trying to get paid and disappear. She watched him, didn't interrupt. I've spent most of my life thinking silence was safer, that not caring was easier. Then you come along, quiet as can be, and somehow the silence with you doesn't feel empty. Evelyn shifted closer, not much, just enough for the warmth of her arm. To brush his. I'm not trying to be saved, she said. I know, he answered. That's probably why I want to. The wind pushed against the barn doors, but inside, it was still, calm. They didn't say anything else, not because there was nothing to say, but because they both knew sometimes the quiet says more than any words can. In that moment, for the first time in a long time, they weren't two broken people running from their past. They were just two souls, resting in the eye of the storm. The storm rolled out by morning, leaving behind nothing but broken branches and thick silence. The land was soaked in shadows, and even though the sky was clearing, the air still felt heavy. Sam loaded the coach without saying much, glancing once at the barn where the bandits had taken shelter. Evelyn didn't speak either, but when their eyes met, nothing needed to be said. They were lucky. For now, they rode in silence for hours, pushing east through the edge of the desert. By mid-afternoon, the trail began to climb. Rocks grew sharper, trees thinner, and the air colder. The coach wheezed up every slope, and the wheels creaked like old bones. The land had changed now. No more wide skies and open plains. Just narrow passes and steep cliffs that rose like walls. Sam pulled the reins, stopping the coach at the foot of a slope. We'll walk this stretch, he said. Too tight for wheels. Horses need rest. He handed Evelyn a blanket from the back, then slung his rifle across his shoulder. She took it without asking. They walked side by side, boots crunching gravel, wind pulling at their coats. After a long stretch of silence, Evelyn spoke first. Have you ever been afraid to die? He gave a small snort, but didn't look at her. Think I stopped being afraid of anything around age 8, or at least I started pretending. She looked ahead, eyes narrowing against the wind. I'm not afraid of dying, she said softly. That's not what scares me. He glanced over, one brow raised. She touched her chest lightly. I'm afraid of this going quiet. Inside. Like I'll wake up and not feel anything again. Like the world's still moving, but I'm just watching it from behind a wall. Sam didn't answer right away. He just stared at the trail ahead. Then, after a while, he spoke quieter than she'd ever heard him. That's how I've lived most of my life. She looked over. No roots, he said. No real home. Just jobs, roads, people who come and go. You get used to it, the silence, the cold. After a while, you stop noticing it, but that doesn't mean it's not there. She didn't say anything, just kept walking beside him. But since you showed up, he added, pausing, it doesn't feel so empty. They stopped at the top of a ridge. Below them stretched the land they had crossed, dusty, wide, and distant now. It looked like another lifetime. The wind tugged at Evelyn's scarf, brushing strands of hair across her face. Sam stood beside her, hands on his hips, looking out over it all like he was seeing something new for the first time. I don't know what's ahead, he said. I'm not promising I'll change. I'm not some storybook kind of man. I'm not asking you to be, she said. He looked at her, and this time there was nothing guarded in his expression. No wall, just a tired man trying to understand what it meant to feel again. They walked on, further into the mountain trail. That night, they found a small hollow where trees curled around a patch of flat ground, shielded from the wind. Sam built a small fire. Evelyn wrapped herself in the blanket and sat nearby, arms around her knees, watching the flames dance. The cold was sharper up here. It didn't sting, it burrowed. Without a word, Sam took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. She looked. Up, you need it too, she said. I'll manage, he replied. Nights only get worse from here. She pulled it tighter and nodded. Thank you. They sat in silence, not awkward. Just still. Dot at one point she caught him watching her. Not staring, just observing, like he was trying to understand something he hadn't seen before. When their eyes met, he looked away fast, clearing his throat like he'd swallowed dust. Sam, she said, voice barely above a whisper. He looked back. I see a good man in you. He didn't answer. Just stared at her, stunned like the words didn't quite make sense in his head. I mean it, she added. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once, he had no comeback, no smart remark. Just a quiet breath. That night, they sat a little closer. The fire burned low, and the sky above was scattered with stars, silent, ancient, endless. The kind of sky that made you feel both small and connected to something bigger than yourself. Sam leaned against the saddle and closed his eyes. Evelyn curled beside the fire, the coat wrapped around her, her breathing even and calm. He didn't sleep right away. Just lay there, listening, watching the sky. His chest still carried the weight of old wounds, but something new had started to take root. Something softer. And in the quiet space between them, something had shifted. Not just trust, not just survival. It wasn't love yet, but it was the first step, and that mattered more than he could say. The wind was sharp in the mountains, but the trail down was sharper. It twisted like a snake through jagged stone and loose gravel, a narrow ledge carved by time and weather. Below it, the land spread wide and flat, stretching toward the horizon. Where the army fort waited like a promise still too far to touch. Sam gripped the reins tight, his jaw locked. The horses moved slow, careful, hooves scraping the edge. Evelyn sat still beside him, her eyes focused ahead, shoulders hunched against the cold. Neither had said much since sunrise, but the quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was focused. Then, Sam pulled the horses to a stop, so suddenly the coach groaned in protest. Hold up, he said, voice tight. Evelyn straightened, alert. What is it? He pointed to a narrow ridge above the trail. See that? Those rocks up there? Someone moved them. She followed his gaze. The stone looked too clean, too freshly shifted. You think someone's watching us? She asked. I don't think, he said. I know. He jumped down from the seat and opened the side of the coach, pulling out a rifle. He checked the chamber, then handed it to her. Take this, he said. And listen close. If shooting starts, you run. Follow the trail down to the creek. Don't stop. Don't look back. I'm not leaving you, she said, her voice steady but fierce. That wasn't a request, he snapped. But before either could say more, the first shot rang out. Cracked into the rock near Sam's head, exploding dust into the air. Go, he shouted, diving behind the coach as more gunfire echoed off the canyon walls. Evelyn bolted down the slope, her boots slipping on moose gravel. Behind her, gunfire cracked like thunder. She didn't look back, not yet. Not until she heard the horses scream and the coach groan under a heavy impact. Two men came out of the trees above, one with a rifle, one with a long hunting knife. Faces she remembered, scar down the cheek. Same as the one in the ghost town. Sam saw them too. He raised his rifle. Bad timing, boys, he growled. I'm out of patience. They laughed, stepping closer, confident. You got lucky last time. The one with the scar said. Sam didn't reply. He fired. The man with the rifle took a shot to the shoulder and spun back with a scream. The other flanked wide, knife-flashing Sam turned to face him, but pain exploded in his side. A gunshot tore through the edge of his ribs, throwing him to the ground. He rolled to his side, coughing, spitting blood, but he wasn't done. Not yet. He grit his teeth, lifted the rifle, and fired again. The man with the knife dropped where he stood. The one with the injured shoulder ran, disappearing. Into the trees like a ghost. Sam stood, swaying, blood running down his shirt. "Evelyn," he called, barely upright. "Evelyn." And then she was there, running up the trail, eyes wild, hair tangled by wind, tears streaming though her face was hard with grit. "I told you, I'm not leaving you," she cried, throwing his arm around her shoulders. "I'm hit," he muttered, "but I'm here." They stumbled together to the edge of the trail. He tried to walk, but his legs gave out. Evelyn lowered him gently beside a boulder, pressing her scarf against the wound, hands trembling but focused. "I have to get help," she said, breathless. He nodded, barely. "Forts." 2 days, ride hard, don't stop." "You saved me," she whispered. "Now I'll save you." She stood, climbed onto the horse, and rode like the wind was chasing her. The world-blurred sky, dirt, wind. Her heartbeat was louder than the hoofs. She didn't cry. Not yet. The land opened in front of her. Then a flag. A wall. Soldiers. She rode hard into the gates. "Help!" she shouted. "Man down in the mountains, bandits. He's alone." The officer didn't ask questions. Within 15 minutes, a rescue party was riding full speed behind her. She led them back, not stopping for breath. Back up the slopes, back through the shadows. Sam was still there, barely, slumped, pale, barely conscious. He looked up as they approached, blinking through the blood and light. "I thought ... maybe." "I came back," she whispered, grabbing his hand. "I couldn't leave you." He smiled just barely. "Didn't know why, but I knew you would." Soldiers lifted him gently onto a stretcher. He winced but never let go of her hand. She walked beside him all the way down the mountain. And in that moment, blood, pain, and all Sam knew, if his heart gave out right here, it wouldn't be a waste of life because she came back. And because now he wasn't alone. Asterisk, it had been 3 months since the mountains. 3 months since blood soaked. Sam's shirt and Evelyn's voice broke through gunfire. 3 months since she rode harder than she thought possible and begged soldiers to believe. A stranger's life was worth saving. Now the land looked different. Green had started to return to the grass. The wind still carried dust, but not the kind that stung. The air smelled of sun-warmed wood, horses, and bread. A modest ranch sat at the edge of a low valley, backed by pine-covered hills. It wasn't much. 2 rooms, a lean-to barn, a crooked fence built one board at a time. But it was real. And it was theirs. The land had been granted to Sam by the Army Civilian Service Recognition. They called it Heroic Assistance, the officer said when he handed over the paper. Sam didn't care for titles. He just nodded once and walked. Out with the deed folded in his coat. Now he worked the land each day, slow and quiet. He didn't talk much about what happened in the mountains, or the scar along his ribs, or how it felt knowing someone came back for him. But he showed things in other ways. He rebuilt the barn board by board, spent hours lining up beams until the frame was straight. Never once rushed it. Evelyn helped. She learned to hammer nails, fix hinges, clean stalls. She tied her hair back with a faded ribbon and wore sleeves rolled high. Her hands got rougher, but her face looked softer. Lighter. Mornings started with coffee. Sam always made it. She'd wake to find a cup waiting by the edge of her bed still. Hot steam curling in the light. No, just the cup. That was his way of saying, "I'm glad you're still here." He never said much, but his silence was different now. Not closed, just peaceful. When he sat on the porch after sundown, he didn't look distant anymore. He looked home, Sometimes Evelyn would sit beside him, not touching, just near enough that their quiets could rest together. One afternoon, she brought out a letter. She didn't say much about it, just called it a habit she'd picked up from her brother. She sat at a small table by the window, ink bottle beside her, pen in hand. Sunlight poured across the floor as she wrote, "Dear Joseph." She wrote about the land, about Sam, about the silence that didn't hurt anymore, about the mornings that started slow and soft, about how she smiled now not out of politeness, but truth. She told him how she thought the fire had burned away everything good in her. But then a man with a worn coat and a quiet voice had given her back something she never expected to feel again, safety. Not just from danger, but from loneliness. When she finished the letter, she folded it carefully and tied it with a piece of string. She walked out to the porch and let the breeze lift it from her hand. She watched it float upward, carried gently by the wind. Then she smiled a deep, warm smile that didn't hide anything. That evening, Sam found her by the garden. She was checking the tomato plants, frowning slightly. He leaned on the fence post beside her. "We're low on oil," he said after a pause. She glanced at him, brushing her hair from her face. "Might ride into town tomorrow. Pick up nails." "Some more seed, too," she nodded. "And cloth," she said. "I want to sew curtains." He raised an eyebrow. "Curtains?" "Yeah," she said with a quiet smile. "Makes it feel like home." He looked at her for a second, just long enough for her to feel it. Then he nodded. "Curtains are important," he said softly. That night, they sat on the porch again. The air was cool, the moon just rising. The wind moved slow through the grass, like it didn't want to disturb the peace. Sam rocked gently in the old chair. Evelyn sat on the step below, shoulder resting lightly against his leg. They didn't speak. They didn't need to, because in that moment, everything was enough. The road, the pain, the fire had all led here. To a quiet stretch of land. The sound of horses near the fence, and a porch where two people who once had nothing could sit in silence and finally feel full. They had survived, but more than that, they had found a reason to live. The day began the same way all good days do, quiet. Simple. The sun rose slow behind the hills, casting golden light over the valley. The morning breeze moved gently through the tall grass, brushing against the fence posts and lifting the corners of the clean white sheet Evelyn pinned to the line. Chickens clucked softly in the background. A cow lowed somewhere out past the barn. Sam stood near the wagon, wiping oil from his hands. He'd been up since first light fixing the axle again, not because it needed it, but because he liked to keep his hands busy. He looked up toward the house. Evelyn was there, standing in the doorway, sleeves rolled up, apron dusted with flour. She waved. He gave a small nod in return, the corner of his mouth twitching just a little. That was their way now. Quiet gestures. Steady rhythm. No drama, no fear. Just the kind of peace that doesn't need announcing. Inside, Evelyn sat at the small wooden table near the window. Her Bible lay closed in front of her, its leather cover worn smooth from the years. Next to it sat another letter. She unfolded it carefully, her fingers slow, almost hesitant. Then, dipping her pen into the ink jar, she began to write. "Dear Joseph, it's been many months now. The wind still whistles through the trees some nights, and I still wake up reaching for your voice, but there's something new here now. I wanted you to know I didn't just survive. I lived." She paused, glancing out the window where Sam was pouring oats into the trough, his movements slow but certain. "His name is Sam. You would have liked him. Rough around the edges, sure, but strong where it counts. And underneath all that gruff, there's a heart that still believes in something. He doesn't say much, but I see it in the way he leaves. Coffee for me before sunrise, or how he fixes the squeaky porch board before I even mention it. We don't talk about the past much. Some things don't need retelling, but I think he carries his own ghosts, same as I do. And for the first time, neither of us is walking alone." She folded the letter gently, tied it with twine, and stepped Outside, the wind picked up, almost on cue. She let the letter go. It caught the breeze and spun upward, carried off into the morning sky, where it danced against the light like a small, quiet goodbye. Later that afternoon, Sam walked in from the barn. He smelled of hay and sun and sweat, earthy and honest. "We're out of lamp oil," he said, setting his hat down. Evelyn glanced up from her sewing. "We can ride into town tomorrow." He nodded. "Could use more nails, maybe another saddle strap. And cloth," she added, smiling, "for new curtains." In the back room, he gave her a soft look. "Curtains again?" "They're important," she said simply. They shared a quiet chuckle, the kind of laugh that didn't need much behind it, just comfort, just time shared. The rest of the day passed slowly. She baked bread. He repaired a loose fence board. In the late afternoon, they sat on the porch, watching the sky shift from pale blue to amber. The silence between them had changed since those first days on the trail. It wasn't the silence of strangers anymore. It was the silence of people who understood each other too well for words. Sam rocked gently in his chair. Evelyn sat beside him on the steps, her shoulder against his leg, her hands folded in her lap. The sun dipped behind the pines. The wind slowed. "You know," Sam said suddenly, breaking the quiet, "there were days before I met you. I didn't think I'd see a good one again, just wake up, ride, sleep, repeat." She looked up at him, but didn't interrupt. "I used to tell myself that life wasn't meant for someone like me, not peace, not roots, not this." He glanced down at her, his eyes softer now than they'd ever been. "But I was wrong." She smiled, not wide, not dramatic, just warm and certain. "The kind that says I know exactly what you mean. It wasn't a wasted life, Sam," she said quietly. "Not even close." He didn't speak again, just nodded once, slow and steady. They sat that way for a long time. The stars began to appear one by one. A cool breeze rolled in, and Evelyn reached behind her, pulling a thin quilt up over their legs. Sam didn't move because this was it. This was the ending neither of them had dared hope for. Not a grand finish, not a loud victory. Just peace. Porch. A good woman. A quiet stretch of land and the feeling after everything that maybe, just maybe, they had found home.